Greetings gamers, today I'm going to be painting up some concrete barriers. Over the last couple of weeks I've been experimenting and revisiting my concrete barriers tutorial. In last week's video I made some new barriers with my hot wire cutting table and applied a new paint scheme to them. Well, while I was doing that I realised that I didn't really like the texture of the barriers, so decided I wanted to experiment with some new methods. So today I'm going to be showing you how to cast some barriers using plaster and sand, and we're also going to be looking at several painting techniques and deciding which one we like best. So let's head over to the bench and get started. To cast the barriers I'm using a mix of plaster powder and sand in a roughly 2:1 ratio. I mix the powder and sand together before adding small amounts of water until it reaches a consistency that I like. This process is far less exact than using just casting powder, so go slow and make sure to stir the mixture thoroughly. If you add too much water you'll lose the texture you want, but if you don't add enough you won't be able to pour it. Like casting with Hearst Arts, you want to let the mix sit for about a minute or two before scraping away the excess and leaving it to dry. Once the barriers are dry and you've pulled them out from the mould, you want to wear the top surface of the plaster with a wire brush. When you pour your moulds, the plaster will settle flat, but just beneath the surface is the grain of the sand, so that when you scrub it with a wire brush, you loosen that plaster and expose the sand. The finished result you end up with depends on the amount of sand in your mixture and how hard you scrub with the brush, so experiment with both to find a texture that you like. Once I'd cast and brushed a batch of barriers, it was time for painting. I found and modified 6 different recipes for painting concrete. 2 of them ended up being almost identical, so I've only shown you one here, for a total of 5 different recipes. We're going to be starting off with a 3-tone grey recipe. This is the type of look you'll find on a lot of terrain, including our original concrete barriers tutorial. We're going to be starting off with a black undercoat and then a base coat of Citadel's Eshin Grey. Next I mixed up some Eshin Grey with some Celestra Grey and used a torn piece of sponge to stipple this onto the piece. I followed this by sponge stippling pure Celestra Grey and then pure Ulthuan Grey. If you want to go one step further you can apply a rusty brown wash to the cracks and the crevices. I make mine by mixing some earth and some rust pigments with a little bit of Lamier Medium. I apply this fairly heavily and then wipe the excess off in a downwards motion to create watermarks. Next I painted up a more blue-grey barrier. I recently started painting my grey stonework with a blue tint that I really like, so I thought I would try the 3-tone method with a more blue tone. Over a black undercoat I dry brush Citadel's Dark Reaper and follow this up with Fenrisian Grey and then Celestra Grey. This gives a darker end result, but was still quite boring to look at compared to some of the options, and not really realistic. Next up I painted a barrier in the same style as last week, using the recipe I got from my buddy Steve over at the Goldfish of Justice. Over a base coat of Deneb Stone I sponge stipple a mix of my base colour and Eshin Grey. This wasn't quite as contrasting as I like, so I got some pure Eshin Grey and stippled that on with a small dry brush. I followed this up by dry brushing the whole piece with Deneb Stone and then Ulthuan Grey. Once that was complete I added my rusty brown wash to the cracks, and in a couple of spots elsewhere, using a paper towel to wipe away the excess in a downward motion to create the streaks. I like this scheme a lot, and if you want a concrete in a more sandy desert colour this is perfect for it. Next I decided to modify Steve's recipe to make a more grey tone version, following the previous method almost exactly but starting from a base coat of Celestra Grey. Overall this scheme was pretty underwhelming and it didn't look nearly as good as Steve's version. The last scheme that I tested was a variation of one I found on YouTube, which I'll link below. I started with a base coat of Celestra Grey and then used a sponge to stipple Celestra Grey mixed with a small amount of Eshin Grey all over the barrier. I did the same using pure Eshin Grey and Ulthuan Grey. I then added a few splatters of black by getting some colour on my brush and striking it against my hand to splatter the barrier. I did this with both pure black and with white. Make sure to put some paper towels down for this step because it is very messy. Next I used some Nuln oil to wash the recesses and the cracks. I went fairly heavy with this and wiped away the excess again in that downwards motion to get some streaks. And once that had dried I used my pigment wash again on all the cracks and crevices, wiping almost all of it away to just leave a stain on that surface. And here you can see a comparison between the different methods. I think the thing that surprised me most about this experiment is just how poor the three-tone grey version looked in comparison once I started following more realistic methods. Like many of you, I've been conditioned into using the three-tone grey as the default for painting stone and concrete through the years, but this was a great experience to help me get out of that. This is also a great excuse to play with colour and mixing your paint by eye to create the tones that you want. By far my favourite technique was the final one that included the white and the black splatters. Those additional steps go a long way to help add a sense of realism. This is going to become my go-to concrete recipe from now on, unless I'm painting pieces meant for a more desert environment, in which case I'll use the goldfish of just this recipe, but I'll probably add some white and black splatters to that too. And there you have it, a comparison between several different painting methods for your concrete barriers. If you enjoyed this type of video where we take several painting techniques and explore them, let me know down in the comments below. But until next time, happy gaming. Thanks for watching. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below for new content every single Friday. And if you want to keep watching, well, there's another couple videos for you to watch just over there. Happy gaming.